Performance is a really nuanced thing to talk about, and we can definitely do better than Geekbench scores. This episode of Some Gadget Guy is brought to you by viewers like you, all of the amazing people who share content across social media, and the incredible generosity of my patrons at patreon.com/somegadgetguy. More info on those awesome nerds later in the video. Qualcomm's Snapdragon Summit kicked off yesterday. I have a lot of thoughts on their presentation, but one thing kind of rang true throughout their keynote address. I'm not on a script here, I'm kind of just going off the cuff. Of course, we had all the posturing and the big chest puffery and our chips better than your chips, and let's talk about all the AIs with someone from Best Buy. Plenty of moments throughout the presentation where I was rolling my eyes pretty hard. I will say I got super excited about the shortest part of the presentation where they actually talked about apps that were getting updated and new audio drivers coming to Windows on ARM. You know, the really practical tech upgrades that will make a meaningful impact on content creators. But that's the nerdy stuff. Why would we spend a lot of time talking about that? No, just show me another pre-rendered graphic bragging about ray tracing on phone games. But I digress. In all the corporate catfighting between all of these CEOs, one of those talking points I felt was important to discuss, but it's been difficult to kind of showcase, and you're not really going to get it from a corporate presentation of bar graphs and synthetic benchmark scores. There's a nuance to talking about performance when we're discussing the most powerful portable computers that we can buy. Some of these computers are portable in the sense that you can unplug them, use them on battery, and use them anywhere you want. And some of these computers are portable in the sense that you unplug them from your home, go somewhere else, and then plug them back into a power source. There are many of us out there who are happy to trade some of the top tier performance that the machine can generate if we can use more of the performance when we're on battery power. And that was a major claim being made by Qualcomm CEO in replying to the recent advancements from Intel and AMD. We can benchmark a laptop plugged in, get really big scores, and then unplug the laptop, do basic tasks, and get really long battery life estimates. So I'm really not trying to make this a pissing contest between people who like their Intel machines and like their AMD machines. I'm just trying to share some of my experiences and some of my testing in describing some of the performance that I see from my Surface Laptop 7, and I'm only going to be grading the machine against itself. I've got 3 tests to try and tax the machine, and I ran each test plugged in and unplugged. And I tried to sort of do a small, medium, large, things that would tax the machine and then for longer periods of time. I'm talking to you on the YouTubes, so obviously I like to cut together silly little YouTube videos. Our first one is a DaVinci Resolve render test. This is the exact same project that I tried to replicate for my phone tests on LumaFusion. It's a 1-minute project file, 6 clips, 100 megabit per second video files, all squished down to a 4K finished video at 50 megabits, watermark, soundtrack, and transitions. Very simple kind of YouTube short, Instagram reel, TikTok kind of video, but it's only a minute long. So running this on battery and while plugged in, I got exactly the same render time. Again, I'm not trying to detail the pros and cons and make a hit piece comparison with AMD and Intel machines right now, but this is something you can test for yourself. Fire up DaVinci Resolve, put about a minute of footage in your timeline, and see if there's an appreciable difference between rendering on battery and rendering plugged in. Next up, a sort of medium length test, file compression. We're all super excited about file compression. 7-Zip has an ARM native app, so I fired that up, and they've got a built-in benchmarking tool, and I was pleasantly surprised to see those compression numbers improve on battery. This actually ran better when it was not plugged in. I made sure that I was running these tests in the middle of the laptop's battery capacity, so the laptop battery cell is actually charging. It's not just plugged in. So I believe that the additional heat that's being generated by charging up a battery quickly, on top of running the SoC a little bit harder, likely contributes to this scenario where on battery life, this actually runs quicker. And then I wanted to run something just a little bit longer, so I fired up Handbrake. I have a lovely 4K Blu-ray rip of Hot Fuzz. It's a 20 gigabyte file, taking it from 4K down to 1080p and cutting the average bitrate in half, keeping it in an MKV container using H.265 and using the Media Foundation hardware encoder. For this one, I really wasn't trying to time the entire transcode. It just takes way too long to get those kinds of performance numbers, but I did want the laptop running hard. I wanted those fans kicking on. I wanted this thing running hot. With the Surface plugged in, we hit peak fan noise somewhere around 10%. So I recorded from 10% to 15% just to kind of get a scale of what was happening with the frame rate. I got that 10 to 15% window, then I waited for the laptop to cool down and I reran that same test. Now, this isn't as simple as the number scores that we get from 7-zip, but yet again, my performance in Handbrake seemed to improve on battery power. In that 10 to 15% window, we saw more transcoding time above 100 frames per second and fewer drops down into the high 80s. I know, this is the most exciting YouTube footage you can see is watching me transcode video. Tech reviewing is so glamorous. Between 7-zip and Handbrake, my hypothesis is while the battery is actively charging, you're likely to see slightly reduced performance because of how the whole chassis needs to deal with heat. And this is an opportunity where I should probably rerun these tests again when the battery is fully charged. And that current is mostly going towards just driving the machine as opposed to topping off the battery in addition to powering the machine. There's a fun gamesmanship of being a hobbyist. If it's sports, if it's politics, if it's technology, it's my team versus your team. And I totally contribute to that kind of playful division. I'm an ARM guy. I really feel ARM chips would be incredible consumer solutions for a wider variety of compute products, and I'm ecstatic to see more of this style chip make their way into laptops that people can really buy. What I'm most interested in is the competition. Decades of AMD versus Intel, we got stuck in a pretty bad place, and it took Apple releasing the M-series processors to knock us out of that. M-series processors being ARM chips. So we shouldn't be overly surprised that some of the biggest gains that Intel has made recently are by making their x86 chips as close to resembling ARM as they can. What I'm saying is that it's not fruitful to be Team Intel, Team AMD, Team Qualcomm, Team MediaTek, Team Apple, because already look what's happened this year. I've got CPU performance I can count on when powered by the battery, and both AMD and Intel have delivered some of the most competitive processors they've ever released over the last 10 years, and we're already seeing leapfrogging on things like GPU performance, where my Surface laptop definitely falls behind. That's competition. Now I would expect an X-Elite Gen 2 to come out in another year, where Qualcomm's gonna take that GPU performance a bit more seriously like they do on phones, and Intel and AMD will need to respond. We want that spectrum of choices. So you can absolutely get an x86 laptop that will hands down outperform the Surface Laptop 7. I've used a bunch of gaming and creator laptops with dedicated GPUs. Those are monster workstation machines, but they are not monster machines when you run them from their battery. Here, I'm definitely making a compromise in that peak top-end performance, but it actually seems to get a little bit faster in the scenarios I need it to perform the best when I don't have access to an outlet to plug this thing in. Above all, if it's x86 versus ARM, or Intel versus Qualcomm, or AMD versus Apple, that's the fun gamesmanship. That's the chest puffery. That's the reality TV of the tech conversation. What matters more is the joy and the curiosity of just looking at the silicon landscape. That's what's really fun, and that's where we get better products for consumers to buy. I love digging into this stuff. I love testing laptops and mini PCs and smartphones, and the folks who get to see the results of my testing first are my incredible patrons over at patreon.com/somegadgetguy. A huge thank you from the bottom of my heart, as these are the folks that are literally helping to keep the lights on here in the Gadget Lab. They're basically the coolest geeks in the universe. I think you would want to be one of the coolest geeks in the universe. I mean, that's just my take on it. So I hope you'll check them out at patreon.com/somegadgetguy. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at somegadgetguy, basically everywhere. But these days I'm trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, a lot less so on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and definitely not much on the Twitters. And I will catch you all on the next video.